Thank you all for being here today, and welcome to the 2025 Powering Alabama's Future webinar series hosted by the Alabama Mobility and Power Research Center at the University of Alabama. My name is Elizabeth Pettit. I serve as the Workforce Development Coordinator at the AMP Center and will be hosting today's episode. Now, whether you are new here or a longtime listener, I would like to start us off by sharing a bit about the webinar series and introduce our lovely panelists. The goal for this series is to provide those interested in the battery manufacturing and electric vehicle industries with a general understanding of various topics such as infrastructure, mining and supply chains, workforce development, safety, economic development, and the like in the great state of Alabama in easily digestible chunks. This episode is titled Economic Impact and Strategic Development of Alabama's Future. It focuses on the long-term economic benefits of Alabama's growing battery industry and examines how the state is positioning itself as a global leader in battery manufacturing and innovation. Now that my long-winded introduction is done, I would like to take a moment for each of the panelists to introduce themselves. If you could each share your name, affiliation, and what you or your company do, that would be greatly appreciated. Mike, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. My name is Mike Oatridge, and I am the Executive Director of the Alabama Mobility and Power Center at the University of Alabama. Our center is really focused on everything that's in its name, mobility and power. So really looking at the evolving changes in transportation. Of course, the largest change is going to be electrification. And we focus on battery technology and as well as propulsion technology, workforce development, and forecasting. In addition to that, we also focus on stationary battery technology, which can support things like data centers or sustainable energy sources. So really holistically looking at the storage of energy and the use of that energy. Thanks.
And we can just round robin around if you guys want to pop in.
Good afternoon. I'm Veronica Kroc, and I'm a Senior Project Manager at the Alabama Department of Commerce. Commerce serves as the lead economic development organization within the state, and I have the privilege of being a member of the Alabama statewide EV battery team. So in this role, I work across industry, research, utility, workforce, work with all these partners to strengthen our state's position in the rapidly evolving battery sector. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lauren Hyde. I'm the Executive Director of the Alabama Business Intelligence Center at EDPA. EDPA stands for the Economic Development Partnership of Alabama. We're a private sector nonprofit economic development organization, and we provide private sector resources and direct engagement to support the work of state and local economic developers. As I mentioned, I lead the Alabama Business Intelligence Center, or ALIntel for short, at EDPA, and our mission is to generate actionable business intelligence to secure new investments in Alabama. And happy to be here today.
My name is Tom Brinkley. I'm an economic development lawyer at the Alabama-based law firm of Maynard Nexsen. I'm very pleased to be a part of this webinar today. We work with companies that are expanding and locating in Alabama and throughout the Southeast, and are excited to be a part of this discussion today.
Good afternoon. My name is Max Snyder. I'm the Business Development Director for the Tuscaloosa County Economic Development Authority. So the TCEDA is Tuscaloosa County's engine for job creation and growth. We're the go-to source for site selection, building and facility assistance, workforce development and training resources. And we're also the county's abating authority for any tax incentives for projects located within the county.
Wonderful. Thank you all. We are very excited to have you here today. As you can see, we have a great group of panelists who bring a wealth of knowledge about both economic and strategic development, among an assortment of other things. So without further ado, I did want to jump right into our questions and our discussion for the day. First up, I would again like to start with my wonderful colleague, Mike Oatridge with the AMP Center. Mike, what role does workforce development play in ensuring that Alabama can capitalize on its growing battery industry? And then how do you see this impact on local job markets?
Yeah, so it's all about workforce is the only answer to that question. Years ago, there was always three main pillars that brought economic development together, which is, the site and the incentives and the workforce. And very honestly, almost all states in our country and almost everywhere else across the world really has spent a lot of time developing sites and incentive packages that are somewhat comparable. The big differentiator right now is workforce. And that workforce, we have a strategic advantage in a lot of ways. So workforce development programs, first of all, have to be robust, which means they have to be based off of what industry needs, and therefore not only understanding what they need today, but what they need in the future. So for example, there's not a huge battery industry in the United States, but there's going to be. So therefore, we have to prepare that workforce for the industry that it's on its way. But the other huge advantage that Alabama has is because it's low cost of living, the participation rate or labor participation rate is fairly low because people can afford to have one person working in the family, the other one staying home, which then gives a workforce development program the chance to succeed. So if you build the best workforce development program in the world and you have a 98% labor participation rate, that's only 2% of the people that you can really affect. Whereas the lower participation rate in the labor force allows us to really make a big impact and provide additional workforce to growing industry as well as existing industry. So that's why we've really focused on building out a workforce development program that is based on research. And our research is only based off use-inspired research that industry wants. So at the end of the day, research really has two major outputs. One of them is innovation. In a perfect world, we designed a battery that never, ever degrades. Wouldn't that be nice? All our cell phones could last more than 6 months. The reality is we're probably not going to do that, though. But in the pursuit of that research, we're going to gain a lot of knowledge into an industry that we've never really participated in this country. And therefore, we can build out a curriculum base that we know will be applicable to the industry that we're recruiting into the state. So that's really, at the end of the day, it's all about people. People use tools to change materials into products. People use tools made and manufactured by people, materials made and manufactured by people, and sell to consumers that are people. So if we focus on the people, we will win.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And I love that you framed the question kind of as a comparison between national workforce participation rates and shown what is currently happening in Alabama. You guys will definitely see workforce development and career pieces sprinkled throughout this discussion in general, as that is my area, as well as a really big piece of what the AMP Center does. Next, I would like to build on that and hear from Veronica Kroc with the Alabama Department of Commerce. How is Alabama attracting companies involved in the battery industry, and what is being done to ensure local job creation in this sector?
Great question. I'll build on what Mike was just saying. It really, workforce is the big driver, and you see that across sectors. But specifically with battery, we're very fortunate in having the AMP Center as a huge resource, a huge, certainly recruiting tool for us, and as in addition to AIDT, Alabama Industrial Development Training. So I'll start with talking about Those two, Mike already, talked about the AMP Center, but it truly does offer a one-of-a-kind opportunity for companies. So it's plugging the industry straight into applied research. Once we're able to get companies to come and visit and they see the great work that's being done at the AMP Center, they want to be a part of it. We have seen it time and time again. So we are so fortunate to have the AMP Center as part of our strategy, our Alabama strategy, when we're looking to bring in these companies. So R&D and industry partnerships are huge. So that's a big piece of the puzzle that truly sets us apart from other states. The second that I already mentioned, AIDT, Alabama Industrial Development Training, that's our no-cost custom training arm that's actually housed within the Alabama Department of Commerce. They design recruiting, screening, and pre-employment training, as well as upskilling for existing companies, and they tailor it to each project. So in addition to that, they're investing $30 million in an EV technology training center that will be offered to Alabama companies at absolutely no cost, allows their employees to go there for training, for upskilling. So extremely fortunate to have this as truly our best incentive that we offer at the state. Coupled with that is just having sites. Mike mentioned that a little bit earlier. We have initiated some programs at the Alabama Department of Commerce that helps us to make sure that we have shovel-ready sites that already have due diligence done, have utilities at the site, have some grading done. So all of these things really play well with attracting businesses. So workforce, of course, being top of mind, but then also having a site where they can build a facility, especially when there are speed to market concerns. So Alabama has really stepped up and created programs that help our local communities do that, have sites ready. I've already mentioned incentives, certainly when I was talking about AIDT, but certainly we have competitive performance-based incentives. Mike talked about that as well. So under the Alabama Jobs Act, we offer a jobs credit, which is a cash rebate on payroll, as well as an investment credit, so that companies can use to offset tax liability. Another big thing is reliable, cost competitive power. I'll let my colleagues at the power companies talk a little bit more about that maybe in future episodes. But in my experience working with our power providers within the state, we do have a competitive edge because we do have reliable, cost competitive power. So that is proving extremely important in a lot of the projects that we're seeing come across now. So how we ensure local job creation, we just make sure that we're feeding that talent pipeline, from the great work that the AMP Center is doing to what AIDT is doing. We're addressing K through 12 to the community college level to universities. We're making sure that we have that talent pipeline, both short-term and long-term pipeline available for companies. And we're communicating that. We're able to help companies understand that we can provide the workforce pipeline, which will lead to job creation. As long as you can help them understand that we're able to meet their workforce needs, that's usually, like I said, top of mind, one of the top questions that they have. So that definitely helps us to ensure local job creation by telling the story, by telling the story about our workforce pipeline. We certainly also look to recruit for in populations like the veteran population. We give incentives for projects that locate in rural communities. So we're really trying to address local job creation across the board, and we're seeing real world results, honestly. The Mercedes-Benz battery plant in Bibb County is a really good example of that.
Wonderful. And it is clear that the Department of Commerce does so many different things and just has such a strong hand in this developing market in Alabama. I love that you brought up AIDT, which is, of course, one of our very large partners here at the AMP Center as well. We do have Kevin Taylor on in another episode, so I won't go too deep into that, but we are very excited that you did bring that up. Along that same line of overall development in Alabama, I want to transition over to Lauren Hyde with EDPA. Lauren, how are you working to attract new investments and support the growth of the battery manufacturing industry in Alabama? And what strategies are in place to ensure the state remains competitive in this emerging industry?
Thanks for that question, Elizabeth. At the EDPA, our role is to make sure Alabama is not just competing for battery industry investment, but to be a part of a team that is actively shaping the future of the industry in the Southeast and beyond. Through AL Intel, our Business Intelligence Center, we turn information into opportunity, giving Team Alabama the data and foresight to target the right companies, de-risk projects, and support long-term growth. Our approach is disciplined and research-driven. By mapping industries, companies, and executives and aligning those with Alabama's unique value proposition, we built a pipeline of prospects in the battery, mobility, and bioscience and forestry sectors for the state. But we have the most traction and deepest track record in the battery and future of mobility spaces. And that's really due to the strong value proposition and existing ecosystem that we have. And so it's excited to think about all of the opportunities that we have to build this ecosystem more. Just in the past year, this process has delivered more than 40 qualified leads for the state, 17 of which are already active projects. And in the battery segment alone, we've supported projects ranging from critical mineral refining to synthetic graphite production, with capital investment opportunities ranging from $15 million to $650 million. Job counts that can range in, the teens to the hundreds, and certainly up into the thousands. So we're well versed in many different sizes of companies and many different life cycle stages of these companies. And these are all projects that could anchor Alabama's role in the global supply chain. And what keeps Alabama competitive is not just chasing the next manufacturing facility, but it's building that sustainable ecosystem. That means supporting startups as well as global manufacturers, all of who work really well with our partners at the AMP Center and our statewide economic development partners at the Department of Commerce and Innovate Alabama. Aligning our workforce pipeline with our premier workforce training programs, like Veronica mentioned, AIDT, and our community college system and universities, and especially the AMP Center's workforce efforts, is extremely important to remaining competitive. And finally, ensuring that we are supporting companies in their supply chain journey to become what we call FEOC compliant. For those familiar with those federal government terms, that's foreign industry of concern. And so the fact that we have a lot of the assets that allow these companies to meet federal and defense priorities is really a standout for Alabama. We've expanded our research to technology attraction at EDPA because innovation from battery software to advanced materials is what will keep Alabama ahead of the curve. And our message to founders and investors is simple. Alabama is putting founders first. So I hope that some founders listen to this and reach out so that we can support and make those connections. So just to close, ultimately EDPA's role is to be a convener. We bring together state, local, federal, and private partners. So whether it's an OEM, a recycler, or a startup innovating in next-gen chemistries, they see Alabama as a place where their business can scale. That's how we ensure this industry's growth translates into jobs, innovation, and long-term competitiveness for Alabama.
Wow, Lauren, you definitely hit the nail right on the head. Collaboration is key to success, especially in this industry that is still developing in Alabama nationally as well as globally. So we definitely appreciate those insights. Also from the state of Alabama, and more specifically, the Tuscaloosa County Economic Development Authority, we have Max Snyder. Max, how are local economic development agencies ensuring that the benefits of the battery industry are felt statewide, and what strategies are being used to support underserved areas?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to take a few moments to kind of talk about some of the things we've done in Tuscaloosa that have led to success in this battery industry, and then also discuss some other collaborations with our surrounding rural counties that I believe is benefiting them as well. The first thing is partnership and collaboration is key. And so we've already heard from three of our great partners from the AMP, Commerce, and EDPA. Without them, you're kind of lost at sea, to say, because this is an ever-evolving industry that a lot of us local EDOs, we can't necessarily keep up with all the different changes. So by partnering, especially with AMP and Mike and his group, we are able to stay on the forefront of a lot of these, projects and any initiatives that are coming down the line. So that really helps us not only identify projects, but also vet some that may come to us or that we generate, internally. So they've been a key partner with us on this. The second thing is know what's in your backyard. So not your existing industry, not only what the battery ecosystem could mean to, say, a Mercedes-Benz, we all know the EV story, but also are there certain companies that may be able to diversify their operations and play a role in the supply chain as you start to build out some of the, critical minerals especially. Is there something that we can do with an existing company that may expand their portfolio, but also support this ecosystem? Another key, and we were lucky because of having Mercedes and some of the projects we worked early on in this, is educate your local officials and your decision makers. Because this can be, there's a lot of gray area out there, and everybody may have their opinion of EV. So the people who are in elected positions or decision-making positions, educating them on the benefits of the battery supply system and the EV world, that can make a huge difference as you go to work projects and try to garner support for job creation and capital investment in those. Now, from the underserved rural side of things, I think that what Veronica mentioned for projects looking at rural counties, the advantage for them is they can be highly competitive on some projects that may not create as many jobs or have as large a capital investment in some places like Tuscaloosa County. So that actually makes them sometimes a little more competitive when you go to compete with other states for these projects. And I will say too that, work with your surrounding counties as much as possible. I know this is, sometimes an issue in economic development. Everybody wants to win. We understand that, but sometimes there are projects that may not make sense for Tuscaloosa County, but may make sense for a surrounding county. And so we maintain great relationships with our colleagues in those counties. And because at the end of the day, just because it's 1 mile across a county line doesn't mean that you're not going to benefit. So that circles back to the beginning collaboration part, not only from our state level partners, but also your neighbors. Try to collaborate when possible with them.
Wonderful, thank you. And you touched on it as well as Mike earlier, just the underserved areas and the ability that they can bring to expand not only workforce development in this specific industry, but in all industries in Alabama because of that low participation rate, because of the opportunities that other companies have when they do move into those areas. So I definitely appreciate that answer and that discussion. And then last but not least, that brings us to our final panelists, Tom Brinkley with Maynard Nexsen. Tom, what legal, regulatory, or strategic considerations should Alabama prioritize to position itself as a leader in the domestic critical mineral supply chain? And how can public-private partnerships support these efforts in a rapidly evolving global market?
Thank you, Elizabeth. There's a lot in that question, but I'll do my best to answer it. So from a legal standpoint, there are really 3 areas that come to mind for projects like this. There's land use and planning, there's permitting, mostly environmental permitting. There's also the economic development incentive side of things. Alabama is in a great position when it comes to critical minerals for a couple of reasons. One, not only is Alabama rich in biodiversity, but it's rich in geological diversity. Alabama has a lot of critical minerals that people really haven't spent a lot of time talking about, but hopefully with this webinar and others, we will. There's 50 some odd critical minerals out there, of which Alabama has at least 13 and upwards of 23 right here in the state of Alabama. And we have a great opportunity, especially as it relates to graphite, but also with cobalt and with rare earth elements, to really put Alabama on the forefront when it comes to critical minerals. The good news is we have a very light regulatory environment in the state of Alabama. For example, the Surface Mining Commission in Alabama regulates coal extraction, but it doesn't oversee mining in the areas of critical minerals, whereas some of our neighboring states, like Florida and Louisiana and Texas, do have regulation of critical minerals. We also have a favorable business climate, as we all know and as we've talked about, and collaboration as well as that. One thing I think is very interesting in Alabama is that for every oil or gas well that's drilled, wherever it might be in the state of Alabama, the core sampling is required to be saved and given to the Geological Survey of Alabama, or GSA, so that anybody who wants to drill for critical minerals in the state of Alabama can go to the university and the core and sample repository database and find out what critical minerals were extracted where in the state of Alabama as part of the mining process. So we really have graphite, I think, as the main critical mineral that we need to be focusing on in Alabama. And it's interesting from an economic development standpoint that graphite really it's two economic development projects. There's the mining side of the project, and then there's the processing side of the project. If you build just the mine, then you've got to go send that raw material to another location, really outside of the United States, and have it processed, and you've kind of only solved half of the problem. If you build just the processing plant, then you don't have the raw material to be able to, for example, create the graphite needed for the EV industry. So it really makes a whole lot of sense to look at this, certainly in the graphite area, as two projects. The bigger economic development kind of incentive project is probably the processing plant. And we see that as where the jobs are going to generally be created and where the state and locals can become involved. It's interesting how tariffs play into this as well, because if you send your graphite, your raw material, out of the state into another country, say Brazil, and it has to come back from Brazil, it can be tariffs that are imposed on that as well. So just want to mention those. From a strategic standpoint, Alabama is very well positioned, and it's organizations like AMP that are really bringing together all the players that can really allow us to capitalize on this industry. Public-private partnerships, those are coming to play probably more on the processing plant side, whether it be water treatment needed for a processing plant or roads needed to be built for that plant. So mining does not probably have as many public-private partnership opportunities, but those need to be kept in mind as well. So I guess I'm most excited about the graphite potential.
I truly could not have asked for a better group of panelists to speak to this topic and just give our listeners a strong foundational knowledge about strategic and economic development in Alabama and the Southeast in general as it relates to battery and EV manufacturing. I want to wrap up our discussion today with a question for all of our guests, so please feel free to jump in as necessary. What future innovations or policies do you believe are essential to ensure Alabama remains a competitive force in the global battery market, and how can we prepare the workforce for these changes?
I guess I'll go. So I think Tom just brought up a very good point. Access to raw materials. So we can't think of the battery industry as the assembly of the battery. And I think that's where a lot of emphasis has been, because it's a big announcement. It's 1,000 acres and I'm building a gigafactory, and everybody goes, oh, look at that. And that's the future of I want one of those too, kind of thing. what I think people aren't understanding is almost all the materials that go into that gigafactory right now are coming from overseas. And very honestly, probably 60 to 70% of the materials are coming from China. So we have to control our raw materials. We have to control our raw materials flow. That's why we're seeing this emerging battery belt across the Southeast, primarily for a couple of reasons. The customers are there. So we produce a little over 4 million cars in the southeastern parts of the United States right now, and that's growing every single day, very honestly, with projections up to 6 to 6.5 million cars being produced in the southeastern states in the next 5 years. Second, we have deep water ports in Georgia, in Mississippi, and in Alabama. We have access to raw materials. So again, Tom mentioned graphite. A lot of people, when they hear lithium ion batteries, they just assume it's mostly lithium. A lithium ion battery is about 2 to 3% lithium. It's about 30 to 40% graphite. So you want to locate a facility closest to the hardest thing for you to ship, the heaviest thing and the bulkiest thing, which is graphite. In addition to graphite, though, we also have an ample supply of lithium. And lithium is found in the Smackover Basin, which runs from Arkansas all the way down into South Alabama. And we are working with companies to extract that. And then in addition to that, there are companies that are being recruited to fill in all of the other blanks, I guess I'm saying, whether that be nickel or we already have aluminum. So what I'm saying is we have the bookends. We've got the raw materials. We've got the customers that want those raw materials. This makes the southeastern United States the perfect place to create a battery manufacturing hub. And Alabama just happens to be the belt buckle. So we are really, really well positioned to be able to not only participate, but to lead the effort in the Southeast towards electrification. That's not just me speaking. 40% of all recent EV announcements have been in the southeastern United States. $37 billion has been invested. So how this reflects to workforce is there is a dire need. That's how it reflects. And how do we then now retrain, and how do we create curricula that is applicable to these changes is something that we are tackling head on. Veronica talked about what the state is doing. We're building out an EV training center, first of its kind. The state of Alabama has really recognized this opportunity and has invested in things like the AMP Center, like AIDT, like the amount of time and effort that's put into recruiting companies. And we've been very successful because of where we are, who we are, and what we can do. So we have a very, very rosy outlook, I'll say, as we move forward. And that is echoed by the amount of companies that are now looking at Alabama as their site to expand.
Well, and building on that too, on what Tom and Mike were saying, replicating the proven success of recycling in the lead acid batteries, which I think Lauren's team put together a great report that we've all had a chance to kind of dive into. But that report indicates that, lead acid batteries have a 99% recycling rate. So, Alabama potentially could lead by hosting recycling, second life facilities, reducing the reliance on those imported materials and creating high value jobs that go along with that. So there's definitely some opportunities there, just building on what Mike and Tom were saying.
Thanks for the research shout out. I love that stat.
It's a great stat.
It is. And it just it really should let the world know that we get it in Alabama, right? We understand the past. We have a great legacy. and what it means to work in metals and advanced materials and automotive and aerospace. And so we are innovative, and we are looking to, the recyclability components and sort of the primary critical minerals. And so I think we have the right thesis. And so because of that, we've been able to bring industry, academia, public sector partners together with the right lens. And I think that's sort of a welcoming framework for companies. And it allows us to innovate. It allows us to provide the level of support that these companies need, in even mature companies in an evolving landscape. So the fact that you can pilot and partner and test what you're doing with AMP Center, and you're one step away from a multitude of streamlined workforce providers. And we have folks, thinking about how to make your capital go further. I think that's sort of like the best combination, in addition to sort of the obvious regulatory environment that Tom outlined for us. So I think we just have to keep doing more of what we're doing, because what we do really well in Alabama is collaborate and coordinate. And I think that's sort of the key to winning the game, more than any one individual policy or even one individual innovation. It's just the ability to continue to iterate in an ever-changing market.
Yeah, Lauren, I like what you said there about continuing to do what we're doing so well right now. And I think as we go forward in the future, one of those things I think from a local level that we see is very important and needs to continue and grow are some of our state level programs and policies that have been put in place. The SEEDS Act, Growing Alabama Tax Credits, and Innovate Alabama Tax Credits. Those programs were off to a great start, and I encourage anyone who has not looked into those programs to take a look on the local level and see how that can help you not only develop sites, but you can kind of help companies start to offset some of that capital they may need to get started. So continuing what we've got going there, but also growing it, I think will make us even more competitive than we are at the moment.
All right. Well, once again, thank you all. This has been a fantastic, insightful discussion surrounding the economic impact and strategic development of Alabama's future. As always, the AMP Center thanks all of our participants for your continued support. And for our listeners out there, be on the lookout for our upcoming webinar episodes. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at empitt@ua.edu or the AMP Center directly at ampcenter@ua.edu. See you next time.